This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 53, Reflections on 1 Year in Podcasting. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is January 9th, 2014. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode number 53 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you happen to be listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. That means you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your smartphone or your computer or your tablet or your listening device of choice. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. In last week's podcast, we talked about how you can start the new year off right by revisiting some of the steps that we outlined in our original Content Marketing 101 series. So if you happen to miss that episode, please feel free to click on over to iTunes or to Stitcher or to the RSS feed and get all caught up. So that brings me to today's topic. This is a super special episode because it marks the 1 year anniversary of the Content Marketing Podcast.
Happy birthday!
Yes, thank you, studio audience. It is awesome. So with that in mind, we are devoting this episode to reflections on our first year. Some lessons learned, some surprises, and hopefully a little bit of wisdom to pass on to those of you who might be considering a podcast of your own. But first, I want to debut a brand new feature today as we celebrate our 1 year anniversary. Towards the end of last year, we did a podcast about Facebook's latest update and the ramifications for us content marketers. And I got a lot of really positive feedback on that. A lot of you said, you chimed in to say you appreciated the update and that you could really use more of that kind of news you can use with respect to the tools that we use as content marketers. So with that, we've added a new section we are calling the news feed. And that's just going to be a quick rundown of what is going out there that impacts the content marketing world. Now, I expect that much of what we're going to be reporting on will have to do with social media and SEO because, those technical aspects of our work as content marketers are the most volatile, the most likely to change, and the most likely to have updates that we need to be aware of. But I'm also going to include what I'm calling a content hit of the week. And that would be a piece of content that I found, whether it's a blog post or maybe a video or a podcast episode that I found to be particularly informative and useful and that I recommend that you check out. So, without further ado, here is our very first newsfeed segment. So today for our first news feed, I'm going to start off with something that really is exciting. It's an update from Facebook that is actually useful. So yay. What Facebook has done, now a lot of you may know you can schedule posts in advance for your Facebook page. You can, there's a little clock icon in the corner that lets you set up the time and the day and time when that post publishes. Now previously, those posts were not able to be edited once you scheduled them. So if you scheduled a post, say for next Tuesday, and you needed to make an edit, you would have to delete that post and start all over again. Well, Facebook, in its wisdom, is now allowing us to edit those posts. So you can go into a scheduled post, you can change the content, you can change the date and time, you can change the link, the photo, the video, whatever is included in that post. You can edit the whole thing. And this is great for me because I use advanced scheduling for a lot of my clients, especially now that Insights lets us know the best times to post throughout the day. So this is a huge help to be able to deal with last minute changes that affect our posts. So Facebook, thank you. I don't say that very often, but thank you. That's a really, really useful update. Also in the news is that Vine, and you might remember Vine is the 6-second video service that lets you record quickie videos. They have launched vanity URLs. So you can now go into your Vine account and create a URL instead of vine.co/resonanceXP5522 blah blah blah, you can set it as your brand name or something relevant to the content that you're posting. So for example, if you go to vine.co/resonance, you will get to see all of Resonance's vines. So that's pretty handy, especially if you're giving out that URL on other venues. It's a nice, handy, quick, short vanity URL that you can give out to your peeps. So on today's content hit of the week, I wanted to share with you a blog post that I found that I really liked. It's called "Should You Delete That? A Guide to Monitoring Blog Comments" by Corey Aridon at HubSpot. And Corey, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Please let me know if I'm not. But this was a really neat post. It was a guide to handling those touchy blog comments that you're just not quite sure what to do with. Now, the good comments, the ones that say, great content, you're doing a wonderful job, we love you, we always know how to deal with those, but it's the touchy ones. It's the ones that we're not quite sure what to do with. So they go through the various different types of those difficult comments and make suggestions on what to delete and what to leave and how to handle the ones that you do leave. So a very good read, and I will provide that link to that post in our blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's newsfeed update. If you happen to stumble across something that you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so we can share in next week's update. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that we have been at this for 1 year. I am truly, truly amazed that we are celebrating today 1 year of podcasting here at Resonance. And I recently got to thinking about how it came about in the first place. First of all, I've been a huge fan of podcasts ever since they came on the scene, which was, what was it, 2005, 2006, something like that. And I still remember that first batch of podcasts that I started following. Loved Kimberly Wilson's Hip Tranquil Chick series, which is still around, I believe, as Tranquility du Jour. Joseph Jaffe's Jaffe Juice was a big favorite, and quite a few others. So I've always loved podcasts. I've always lined them up to listen to at the gym, in the car, or whenever I have the time and the opportunity. And some people have asked me what happened to podcasts after that first wave of popularity. Because right around 2007, 2008, they were still around, but they just kind of faded to the background. They were just less popular. And I think what happened is, for a while there, audio, social audio, if you want to call it that, got overshadowed by video. So if you recall, 2006 was actually the year that Google purchased YouTube. And that's right around the time when online video started taking off. You started seeing, a lot of really new and interesting and innovative uses of video. I know the Will It Blend series got started around that time. So that surge of popularity kind of nudged audio out of the spotlight for a while. But then in late 2012, we started hearing these murmurings about how podcasting was coming back in a big way. And I remember seeing several explanations for that, which I won't go into right now. But, I started thinking, wow, this is something that I really should start recommending to some of my clients. And as soon as that thought hit, I remembered my rule. And my rule is, actually I have several rules for myself, but one rule is I will never recommend something to a client that I have not at least tried myself. So any social media network, any practice, I will not recommend it unless I've at least tried it. If it doesn't work for me, then I will have at least tried it and can make an informed recommendation. So it's like, okay, Parker, put your money where your mouth is, and let's see about, let's start looking into getting a podcast started. So, after some careful consideration, I decided to take the plunge, and I looked into two really, really excellent resources that I'm going to share with you a little bit later. But as I kind of got into deciding, okay, yes, I'm going to do this podcast, after that we had some decisions to make. Number one, what kind of a podcast was it going to be? What's the goal? What's the ethos? What is it going to be about? And number two, which was a really tough question, how often are we going to produce these episodes? Now, the answer to the first question was pretty clear. I had a real clear picture in my mind of the kind of content marketing podcast that I would want to listen to, which is more practical, nuts and bolts advice that people would be able to take back to their offices and use on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And this would be for practitioners across the board, from solopreneurs to CMOs of large corporations and everyone in between. And there are a lot of podcasts out there that present kind of a different approach. They have a more macro view of our industry. So, for example, who's buying whom? Which company is Facebook looking at buying, or what does Twitter's IPO have to do with anything? And all that is really interesting. It's just it's not what I wanted from a podcast. I wanted something really practical for the work of the content marketer. The second question I really agonized over. I looked ahead to the year and I said, oh my God, 52 episodes. Are you kidding me? But I really felt that I could not build up momentum podcasting just once a month. I just did not see it happening. It was a pure gut thing. I had nothing scientific research to go by, but it was just my gut. And I kind of toyed with the idea of doing it every other week, but that's kind of a strange schedule. It just didn't feel like it could establish a good rhythm. So, I just went with my gut and decided, okay, we're going to do this on a weekly schedule. And I remember that moment of panic, just looking at the calendar and, 52 podcasts over the next year and just wondering, holy crap, how are we going to make this happen? But, here we are 1 year later. And I have to say, producing this podcast, which has allowed me to spend some time with you every week, has become just one of the highlights of my work with Resonance. I so look forward to it. It's one of the great joys of my life. So a big thank you to everyone listening, whether you have been with us since the beginning or if you just found us a little more recently. It is such an honor and a privilege to be part of your content marketing journey. And I hope I continue to meet your needs, to provide what you need from this podcast. And I hope you keep coming back, and I hope you keep recommending us to your colleagues. So with that, I just wanted to run down a few reflections. These are some lessons learned, some surprises along the way. And if you are considering a podcast and you find any of this helpful, then that would be fantastic. Number one, I'm really happy that I looked into a variety of resources before jumping into podcasting. So the two resources I looked at were John Buskall's Launch a Podcast ebook. It's an ebook and a video series companion. And I think he now offers that. At the time, he offered it for a very low price, but I think he offers at least a variation of that for free on his website. And I will provide that link in the blog post. But just a very good resource. And then I also found an e-course. So this was a video e-course called A Podcast Crusher by Robert Plank and Lance Tomashiro. And, using those two resources really kind of filled out the approach that I was able to take to podcasting. Some of it provided advice on one front, and some of it provided some great insights on another front. And those two together really helped me put together a sustainable plan, really, to start this podcast. So if you're thinking about one of your own, I really recommend that you really look out there, get some recommendations, and look at a variety of resources. Another one was Cliff Ravenscraft's podcast. He has a podcast called Podcast Answer Man, and it's all about podcasting. That was another resource. So really look out there, see what's available, and get a variety of sources of input before you jump into the podcasting pool. Another thing that I realized is that a podcast really has some prestige value that's really not matched by any other social media outlets. If people tell you they have a blog, that's pretty common. It's still a great thing to have, but it's pretty common. Or people tell you they have a YouTube channel, that's kind of, something that's more or less expected, a little less so among smaller businesses. But if you tell people you have a podcast, I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if it's because people think it's very difficult, or it's just not considered mainstream. I don't know what, but when you tell people you have a podcast, people tend to really sit up and take notice. A podcast is also a terrific networking tool. I've been able to interview. I was looking at my guest list from 2013, and I was absolutely floored. I mean, I talked to Jay Baer, I talked to Joe Polizzi, I talked to Gary Vaynerchuk, and these are people, if I had approached them out of the blue and said, hey, you want to write a guest post on my blog, or you want to, do a text interview for a blog post, I don't think I might not have gotten the response that I wound up getting. So it's really, and I've really been able to meet some people, people I approached just out of the blue, like the guys from eWebStyle, and just said, hey, let's set up an interview. Please come on my podcast. And it's really helped me to grow my network, because it's really been a great opportunity to get to know some of those other folks who are in or related to our industry. Speaking of those industry experts, getting those interviews was a lot easier than I thought. And I remember interviewing Ryan Hanley of the Content Warfare podcast, and I was saying, wow, Ryan, you get all these great interviews. I said, how do you get them? And he said, well, I ask them. He said, sometimes I, hit them up on Google Plus. Sometimes I'll, get an email and they're very forthcoming. So I said, well, I could do that. So, Jay Baer, literally, I filled out the Contact Us form on his website, and within a few hours, he responded saying, yeah, I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. So if you're thinking about a podcast and you're thinking about adding interviews, which is a terrific way to go. I love doing interviews. I'm heartbroken that I've not done more recently, but it's just such a great way to add different perspectives to your podcast and really broaden that view. Plus, it makes your job really easy because you come up with some good questions and you ask them, and then you let them create the content. So another thing is that you will learn a lot by doing a podcast. Just by putting this content together every week and taking suggestions and trying to make it better week after week after week, I have learned so much, and I've grown so much as a content marketer through this podcast. This is a purely technology focused tip. Whenever you record your podcast, make sure you make a copy before you start editing. Yeah, ask me how I know. No, it was early on. It was like the second or third month I was doing this. I was editing my file in GarageBand, and I did something. I don't know what I did, but I wound up deleting like 5 minutes worth of audio, and I could not get it back. I controlled Z until my fingers were sore, but I just could not get it back. So that taught me the lesson of always saving a copy before I do my edits. We probably need an episode on tech tips for podcasters, but that is my number one tip. So if you're going to get into this wonderful world of podcasting, just put that into your notebook to remember when you start recording and saving your files. And then a final reflection. I've just been overwhelmed by the response. It has bowled me over, guys. I cannot express how much it has awed and surprised me. I checked my numbers a couple of days ago, and to date we have over 17,000 downloads. So in just 12 months, that's just an amazing amount of downloads that have come to this podcast. Not only that, but I was not expecting to be reaching so many people around the world. So again, looking at my stats on Libsyn, most of my listeners are in the United States, but we are also big in Brazil, the Philippines, South Africa, Germany, China. It is just, the list goes on and on. So again, very humbling that I have the honor and privilege of speaking to an international audience week after week. And then also the feedback that I've gotten. People have tweeted me to say, thank you for the podcast. One person tweeted me to tell me she was binge listening. She had discovered us on like episode 35 or 36, and she was going back and binge listening to the podcast from the beginning, and that just warms my heart. I'm so appreciative when I hear those kinds of things, and to hear that we're really making a difference. And some of you guys have chimed in with ideas for improvement, where there are things that you didn't care for that we were doing. We've taken that to heart, and I've definitely appreciated you sharing that feedback with me. So what can I say, guys? It has been an incredible year. It's been can't say this enough. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I hope you keep coming back. I hope we continue to meet your needs, and I hope you keep recommending us to your friends and colleagues. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. Today's tip has to do with a book that belongs on every content writer's shelf. And no, it's not the latest publication by the latest content marketing guru. It's actually a book that was written nearly 100 years ago. And it is called The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White. Now, those of you who are children's literature fans might remember E.B. White as the author of Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little, both favorites of mine when I was growing up. But he also collaborated with his colleague William Strunk on creating this very slim volume, but it is absolutely packed with practical advice for us writers and for us content creators. It weighs in just over 100 pages, and it's just a list of different tips. I mean, very quick, very easy, from simple grammar advice to style tips. And I like to read through it every once in a while just to get a refresher. I always stumble across something that I had forgotten about, and that's really good advice. So I recommend that you pick up a copy of The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White. Read through it, and flip through it regularly. Keep it on your shelf, keep it handy, and be sure to regularly brush up on the advice that it has to offer. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. I've certainly enjoyed our time together. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our blog at resonancecontent.com/blog, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. If you'd like to email me a question to cover in our tip of the week, you can contact me anytime at rachel@resonancecontent.com. And if you'd like for me to come speak about content marketing to your organization, I'm coming up with some brand new presentations for 2014, and you can find some of that information at contentmarketingspeaker.net, or you can shoot me an email or a tweet or hit me up elsewhere on social media. As always, I'd like to leave you with a quote, and today's is from Soren Kierkegaard. He says, quote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.